I never thought I'd be the kind of person to take a job like this. But when you've got bills stacked on the counter, and you're waking up every morning to collection calls, your standards start to slip. That's how I ended up working beneath the city, cleaning tunnels that most people don't even know exist. The listing was vague, just a single paragraph buried on a job site that no one uses anymore. Maintenance crew needed, long hours, high pay, minimal requirements. That was it. No company name, no branding. But the hourly rate was more than double what I was making hauling scrap at the junkyard, and the promise of steady overtime hooked me fast. The interview wasn't much of an interview. A man in a gray jacket met me in a windowless office downtown, handed me a clipboard with a stack of papers, and barely looked me in the eye. I remember thinking it was strange how quickly he slid the liability waivers in front of me, telling me to sign each page. The fine print mentioned biological hazards and psychological stressors. I skimmed, but I didn't ask questions. I just signed, and by the end of the meeting, I had a badge, a pair of heavy boots, and a start date. I told myself it was just a city job, something like waste management, only dirtier. But when I mentioned it to my neighbor, he gave me this blank look, like he'd never heard of the department I named. Later that night, I tried searching for the agency online. Nothing. No listings. No contact number. Not even a building directory. It was like it didn't exist. Still, I showed up. Desperation has a way of silencing doubt. The entrance was hidden at the edge of an industrial block, tucked between two condemned warehouses. No sign marked the door, just a heavy steel slab with a keypad lock. The air around it smelled like rust and damp concrete. A guard stood waiting, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he swiped my badge, opened the door, and gestured me inside. The hallway was narrow, lined with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights. Each step echoed too loudly against the concrete floor, like the building itself was hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling that I shouldn't be there. They led me to a staging room where a single locker waited with my name taped to the front. That detail unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. I hadn't told them my preferred name, hadn't written it on any forms. Yet there it was, spelled perfectly, taped in block letters. Inside the locker was standard gear: coveralls, gloves, a flashlight, a long crowbar. Functional, not new, like someone else had used them before me. The flashlight flickered when I tested it, and the crowbar's handle was slick from too many hands. I sat on the bench, lacing my boots, listening to the muffled hum of the facility. That was when I first heard it. A sound I couldn't place. Not machinery, not water. A kind of low whisper, faint but deliberate, threading through the ventilation ducts. I paused, listening harder, but the moment I focused, it faded. A man in an orange vest entered, clipboard under his arm. He glanced at me, then at the gear. "First day?" he asked. His voice was flat, almost distracted. I nodded. He scribbled something on his page, then looked me over again. "You'll do fine," he said, though it sounded more like a warning than encouragement. "Just remember, when you're down there, you follow the instructions. Every single one. Don't improvise." I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but he was already moving toward the door. That was the first time I realized this wasn't going to be a normal job. The first thing you notice about the tunnels is the air. It doesn't smell like sewers, or basements, or even mold. It's heavier than that, like wet iron and dust, pressed together and left to rot. Breathing it in made my lungs feel weighted, as though I'd swallowed something metallic. The man in the orange vest, he never gave me his name, walked ahead with his flashlight, cutting a pale cone through the dark. I followed close, boots crunching on grit, every sound stretched too far, echoing off unseen walls, doubling back in a way that made it impossible to know if something else was walking behind us. The stairwell ended in a broad concrete passage. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping into shallow puddles along the floor. My guide stopped at a metal door painted red. Faded words were stenciled across the top, but the paint had peeled so badly, I could only make out the letters ton. He unlocked it with a key from his vest and pulled it open. "This is where your shift begins," he said. "Before you go in, you need to understand the rules." I thought he meant safety regulations. Don't touch exposed wires, wear protective gear, stay hydrated. But when he handed me a laminated sheet, the list looked nothing like OSHA guidelines. The words were typed neatly, but some were underlined by hand, as though someone before me wanted to emphasize what mattered most. I read the first line and frowned. Rule 1. Never answer if you hear your name spoken. I looked up, waiting for him to laugh. He didn't. Rule 2. If you see water running against gravity, do not follow it. The paper shook slightly in my hands. Rule 3. Keep your flashlight aimed low. Never shine it at the ceiling. Rule 4. Between the hours of 2:13 a.m. and 3 a.m., stop moving, no matter what. Rule 5. If you hear someone crying, do not search for them. Rule 6. Should you encounter a locked door with a brass handle, leave immediately. Rule 7. Do not, under any circumstances, speak about what you see when you're above ground. I looked back at him. This is a joke, right? His expression didn't change. It's not a joke. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound fell flat against the damp walls. Come on, don't answer my name. Don't look at the ceiling. You expect me to take this seriously? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You'll take it seriously if you want to last. Forget what you think you know about this job. The tunnels don't work the way the rest of the city does. There are things down here that notice when people break the rules. You don't want them noticing you. His tone was so matter-of-fact that I felt my throat dry. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't even trying to scare me. He sounded like someone giving directions to the nearest gas station. Tired, practiced. That was what unsettled me the most. I studied the paper again, tracing each rule with my eyes, as if memorizing them would somehow anchor me. When I glanced back, he was watching me with an odd expression. Not pity, something closer to resignation. You won't be alone, he added finally. Not always. Sometimes we work in pairs. Sometimes it's better to spread out. You'll figure out which nights are which. Wait, I said. How many people work down here? His answer was delayed. Enough. The way he said it made me think the number wasn't steady. Like it changed. We moved deeper, past the red door, into a wider chamber where the ceiling arched high above, dripping condensation. My flashlight beam jittered as my hand trembled. I aimed it at the ground, remembering Rule 3. Even so, the darkness overhead felt alive, like a weight pressing down on me. The man stopped near a junction where 3 tunnels split off in different directions. He crouched, pulled a piece of chalk from his pocket, and marked the wall with an arrow. Always leave a sign, he said. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down. Sometimes slowing them down is the only chance you get. I didn't ask who them was. My gut told me I didn't want to know. He checked his watch. The light from the dial glowed pale green. You'll start tonight. Midnight to dawn. Keep moving. Keep the tunnels clear. Mark your path. If you make it through your first week, the pay will start to feel worth it. I wanted to ask if everyone made it through their first week, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced out a laugh. So, don't answer voices. Don't chase crying sounds. Don't look up. Got it? Sounds easy enough? His eyes narrowed, the beam of his flashlight slicing across the wet floor. The easy ones are the ones people break first. We walked in silence for a long while, our footsteps swallowed by the tunnels. At one point I thought I heard something trailing behind us, the soft patter of steps slightly out of rhythm with ours. When I turned, there was nothing but empty concrete stretching back into the dark. I told myself it was just echoes, but my hands clenched tighter around the crowbar in my grip. and I realized I'd already memorized the first rule without trying. Never answer if you hear your name spoken. The first shift felt endless. I walked the tunnels with my flashlight angled down, the circle of light sweeping over cracked concrete and scattered debris. Rusted cans, chunks of plaster, the occasional rat that darted across the floor. It all seemed ordinary enough until it did around 2 in the morning. I was tracing my chalk marks back toward the junction when I heard it. My name, soft, like someone whispering from the end of the tunnel. Daniel. The sound slid under my skin. It wasn't shouted, wasn't panicked, just spoken, casual, as though a friend had called out to get my attention. My first instinct was to answer. My throat tightened, the word already forming. Then I remembered the list. Rule 1. Never answer if you hear your name spoken. I froze in place. My pulse thudded in my ears. The voice came again, clearer this time. Daniel, over here. It sounded exactly like my brother. Same pitch, same inflection, even the same impatient tone he used when I took too long to respond. But my brother lived 2 states away. He couldn't be down here. He couldn't. My flashlight beam quivered as my hand shook. I aimed it at the wall, refusing to lift it toward the ceiling or deeper into the dark. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The voice shifted, closer now, echoing in a way that bent the acoustics of the tunnel. Why aren't you answering me? Every part of me screamed to say something, to confirm, to explain, but I bit down on my tongue, hard enough that I tasted blood. Silence stretched. The air seemed to thicken around me. Then came a low scraping, like nails dragging across the walls. It moved in short bursts, circling me, as if something unseen was pacing. I clutched the crowbar tighter. The urge to break the rule was overwhelming, not out of defiance, but because the sound of my brother's voice felt so real. It wasn't a trick of memory. It was alive, breathing, waiting for me to slip. I forced myself to back away, step by step, never turning, never speaking. My chalk marks glowed faintly in the weak beam of my light, guiding me back toward the junction. The voice followed, whispering from behind, then from the side, then directly in front of me. Daniel, don't you recognize me? Just look. Just answer. My jaw ached from clenching it shut. Sweat stung my eyes. When I finally reached the red door, the whispers stopped. The silence was so sudden that my ears rang. I stumbled into the staging room, slamming the door shut behind me. My chest heaved, each breath sharp and ragged. The man in the orange vest was waiting, leaning against the lockers with his arms crossed. You heard it, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. His gaze hardened. And you didn't answer? I shook my head. For the first time, a flicker of something like approval crossed his face. Good. That's how they get you. Once you answer, it doesn't stop. They'll follow you home, into your dreams. You'll never know silence again. I swallowed hard. It had sounded like my brother. He gave a humorless laugh. Of course it did. They'll use whatever gets closest to your heart. That's why most don't last. Everyone's got someone they can't ignore. The way he said it chilled me more than the whispers had. It wasn't sympathy. It was experience. I sat on the bench, trying to steady my hands, the rules still sharp in my mind. I'd barely survived one. There were 6 more. I told myself the second night would be easier. I'd survived the whisper, hadn't broken the rule, and now I knew what to expect. But that was a lie, I whispered, just to get myself back through the steel door. The tunnels greeted me with the same heavy air, the same distant drip of water, echoing in the dark. My flashlight cut a weak circle ahead, and I kept it aimed low, my wrist stiff from tension. Every step felt heavier than the last. For the first hour, nothing unusual happened, just damp concrete, rats, and the soft scrape of my boots. I almost convinced myself the whisper had been some kind of testan initiation meant to scare rookies. But then I reached a stretch where the ground sloped downward, and I noticed something wrong. A thin trickle of water slid across the tunnel floor. At first, I thought nothing of it. The pipes overhead constantly dripped, but then I froze. The water was moving uphill. It streamed in the wrong direction, climbing steadily against the slope, curling around bits of rubble as though gravity had been reversed. My throat went dry. Rule 2. If you see water running against gravity, do not follow it. I stared at the flow, mesmerized. It wasn't just climbing, it was pulling. Bits of grit, a bent nail, even a dead insect slid, along with the current, dragged up into the shadows ahead. The longer I looked, the more it felt like it was dragging at me too, tugging at my feet, urging me forward. The logical part of my brain screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity clawed deeper. What was at the other end? Where did the water go? My boot shifted without meaning to, inching closer. A sound broke the trance. A faint, gurgling hiss, almost like breath underwater. It bubbled up from the same direction the current was flowing. Too wet and too steady to belong to pipes. I staggered back, heart hammering. My flashlight beam quivered across the ground, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw something reflected in the moving stream. Not my face. Something sharper, stretched too thin, staring up at me from beneath the water's skin. The current surged, spilling upward faster, as though the thing beneath had noticed me. I forced myself to spin around, boots slipping in the damp, and ran. My light bounced over the walls, my lungs burning. The sound followed wet, dragging the scrape of liquid against stone, rising behind me like a tide dot. At the junction, I nearly lost my footing. My chalk mark was still there, arrow pointing back toward the staging room. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted, refusing to look back, refusing to see if the water had filled the passage. By the time I slammed through the red door, my chest was ready to burst. I bent double, gulping air, my clothes damp with sweat. The man in the vest was there again, standing by the lockers, arms folded. His expression told me he already knew. "You saw it," he said. I nodded, too shaken to speak. His gaze lingered on me for a long moment, and you didn't follow. I shook my head violently. "Good," he said, though his tone was colder this time, "because if you had, you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd still be walking, always walking, pulled along until there's nothing left of you but skin and noise." I wiped sweat from my brow, trying to steady my breathing. What's down there?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "Nothing you need to know. Just remember the rules. They're not warnings. They're boundaries. Cross them, and you won't come back." His words settled in me like lead. I thought back to the whisper of my brother's voice, to the water pulling uphill, and finally understood. The rules weren't strange, they were the only thing keeping me alive. By the third night, I had memorized the rules. I repeated them in my head, with every step, like a mantra. Don't answer. Don't follow. Don't look up. Don't move after 2:13. Don't chase the crying. Avoid brass handles. Stay silent above ground. They didn't feel like guidelines anymore. They felt like lifelines. The man in the vest, who still hadn't given me a name, met me at the staging room again, but this time he looked tired. His eyes were ringed with dark shadows, and his voice rasped when he spoke. "Tonight you're going alone," he said, handing me fresh chalk. "Stay sharp." I wanted to protest, but the weight in his tone told me it wouldn't matter. He wasn't asking. The tunnels swallowed me the way they always did, pressing close, damp and cold. My flashlight beam wavered over the ground, but my mind kept snagging on something else. A door I'd noticed the night before. It was set into the wall near one of the side passages, painted the same dull gray as the concrete. No brass handle, no markings, just a door, half rotted at the frame, padlocked shut. I told myself to ignore it, but curiosity gnawed at me. Why would anyone lock a door down here, in a place already forgotten? That night, I carried bolt cutters in my pack. The lock snapped with a crunch that echoed down the corridor. I froze, listening, waiting for whispers, water, anything unnatural. But nothing came, just silence. The door creaked open, and a stale wave of air drifted out, carrying the smell of mildew and old paper. My flashlight revealed a small chamber lined with filing cabinets. Stacks of boxes sagged against the walls, papers spilling from the tops like they'd been abandoned in a hurry. I stepped inside. The door groaned shut behind me, but I left it cracked. I wasn't about to seal myself in. The cabinets were labeled with dates faded years, stretching back decades. Some drawers refused to open, rusted shut. Others slid free, revealing folders stuffed with handwritten reports. The ink had bled in places, but I could still make out the headings. Incident record, subject responded to vocal, mimicry, casualty report, fluid anomaly, North Sector, disciplinary memo, employee termination for disclosure. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Each file detailed events I recognized from the rules. People who had answered voices, people who had followed the water, people who had ignored warnings. One folder contained a faded photograph clipped to the front. A group of workers stood at the mouth of a tunnel, coveralls grimy, eyes hollow. The man in the vest was there, looking younger, face less worn. My chest tightened. He'd been doing this a long time. Too long. I read an account written in rushed handwriting. The mimic used my mother's voice. I knew she wasn't here. I knew, but I couldn't stop myself. The moment I answered, the sound came from inside my skull. It hasn't left. Please make it stop. Another file was worse. A single page, water-stained. We tried to recover him after he followed the stream. We found pieces, skin peeled like fruit. His boots kept walking long after he was gone. I dropped the page, bile rising in my throat. At the back of the room sat a dusty reel-to-reel recorder. The spools were cracked, but one tape remained intact, labeled in faded ink, shift log -1973. Against every instinct, I wound it into place and pressed play. Static hissed, then a voice-tired male, monotone. This is Operator 12, Day 47 Underground. Rules still apply, but there's something else. They've started saying my name during the day now. In the mirrors, in the glass. I don't know how much longer I can. The tape clicked off mid-sentence. A chill raced through me. Whoever Operator 12 was, he hadn't just heard the whispers below. They'd followed him above ground. The rule about silence outside the tunnels wasn't about secrecy. It was about containment. I stuffed a few files into my pack, needing proof that I wasn't losing my mind. As I turned to leave, my flashlight skimmed the far wall. Words had been carved deep into the concrete, uneven, desperate. Don't trust the one who trains you. My blood ran cold. The door behind me groaned. I swung the light toward it, heart lurching, but it was only the frame settling. Still, the warning burned into me. Don't trust him. The man who gave me the rules. I backed out of the room, sealing the door as quietly as I could. My chalk marks seemed fainter on the way back, like the walls themselves were trying to erase them. When I returned to the staging area, the man in the vest glanced at me, eyes narrowing. You look pale. You see something. I hesitated, the files in my pack weighing heavy against my spine. His gaze lingered too long, like he could sense the truth pressing through the zipper. I forced a shake of my head. Just rats. His expression didn't soften. That night, lying in my cot, I pulled out the photograph again. His younger face stared back at me, surrounded by workers who were all gone now, and in my head, a new rule began to form, one they hadn't bothered to print. Never trust the man who hands you the rules by the fourth night. I could feel the tunnels watching me. It wasn't paranoia, not anymore. Every echo lasted too long. Every drip of water seemed timed to my breath. Even the air felt alive, exhaling in slow, damp waves against my skin. I clutched the crowbar like a lifeline, flashlight aimed at the floor, repeating the rules under my breath. Don't answer, don't follow, don't look up, don't move after 2:13, don't chase the crying, don't touch brass, don't speak outside. But that night, something wanted me to break more than one rule. It started with the crying. A faint sobbing echoed from the eastern corridor, soft and uneven, like a child who'd scraped their knee. My pulse jumped. I froze mid-step, whispering the rule like a prayer. Do not search for them. The sobbing continued, closer now, accompanied by the wet shuffle of small feet. My throat tightened. Every instinct told me to help, but the memory of the files in my pack held me still. I pictured the line, "They'll use whatever gets closest to your heart." The crying grew louder. Then the voice added words. "Please, I can't find my mom." It sounded so young, so raw. My chest ached with the urge to move toward it, but I kept my boots rooted, forcing my light to the ground. That's when I made my mistake. The crying stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against my ear. Then drip. A bead of water landed on my shoulder. I froze, terror clawing up my spine. Slowly, against every instinct, I tilted the beam of my flashlight just a fraction higher. The ceiling rippled. Water clung to it in a shimmering sheet, defying gravity, pulsing like liquid skin. And in the water, a face pressed forward, hollow eyes, a stretched mouth. Its features thinned, distorted, then multiplied another face, and another, overlapping like reflections in broken glass. They were whispering my name over and over, from mouths that opened too wide. Daniel. 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 I staggered back, light dropping to the floor. Hard hammering. Rule 3, never shine it at the ceiling. I'd already broken it. The water bulged, dripping upward now, pulling in impossible directions. The faces pushed harder, mouths splitting into shrieks that never reached sound. The air trembled with the force of it. Then they moved. Liquid arms tore free, slapping against the walls with wet cracks. The tunnel shook as the thing hauled itself downward, peeling away from the ceiling like an enormous, inverted leech. Its form wasn't solid. Pieces of it sloughed off, splashing across the ground, only to slither back into the mass. I turned and ran. The shrieking filled every corner, vibrating in my skull. My boots splashed through shallow puddles, chalk marks vanishing under the thing's reach. The wet slaps of its limbs grew closer, faster, like it was pulling itself toward me in bursts. At the junction, I skidded against the wall, fumbling for my bearings. Left, right. My mind blanked. The sound gave me no time. I bolted right, praying it was the way back. My flashlight beam flickered wildly, barely catching the outlines of pipes and stains. Behind me, the tunnel walls shuddered as the thing slammed into them, dragging itself forward. Then the whispers changed. No longer just my name. They began to mimic my own voice. "Daniel, stop running." The sound echoed inside my head, timed perfectly with my breath. "You can't escape yourself," I screamed back, hoarse, "Shut up," and immediately realized I'd broken another rule. "Don't speak about what you see." The whispers multiplied, my own words thrown back at me from every direction. The tunnels themselves seemed to mock me, every syllable bouncing in distorted harmony. Ahead, a faint gloomy chalk mark, barely intact. Salvation. I hurled myself toward it, lungs burning, legs threatening to give out. The creature slammed behind me, spraying liquid across the walls. A drop landed on my cheek. It burned cold, sinking into my skin like acid made of ice. The red door appeared at last. I tore through it, slamming it shut, chest heaving, eyes wild. Silence. The room was empty. No vest, no clipboard, just me, gasping in the fluorescent hum. I collapsed onto the bench, crowbar clattering to the floor. My clothes dripped, not with sweat this time, but with thin streaks of water that shimmered unnaturally, refusing to dry. I tried to wipe it off, but it soaked deeper, disappearing into the fabric and the reflection of the locker. I saw my own face only for a split second, but the eyes didn't blink in sync with mine. I staggered back, heart thundering, unable to breathe. For the first time, I understood the truth. The rules weren't about keeping the job manageable. They were about survival. The tunnels weren't a workplace. They were a trap. And the thing I had just escaped hadn't finished with me. Not by a long shot. I didn't see him for 2 nights. The staging room stayed empty when I arrived. The lockers humming under the fluorescent lights, the air thick with that metallic weight. Each shift I went down alone, the rules burning in my head, every sound making my skin crawl. But on the 3rd night, he was waiting. The man in the vest sat on the bench like nothing had happened, clipboard balanced on his knee. "You made it back," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes lingered on me a little too long. Most don't. I wanted to ask where he'd been, why he hadn't been there when the thing came off the ceiling. Instead, I forced a laugh. Guess I'm lucky. He studied me, then tapped his pen against the clipboard. "Luck has nothing to do with it. You kept to the rules." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Because I hadn't. I'd looked up, I'd spoken. And somehow, I was still here. That thought wouldn't leave me alone, as we walked the tunnels together. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way he didn't bother marking chalk arrows. The way he never once looked over his shoulder. And most of all, the way the echoes bent around him. My footsteps came back doubled. His didn't echo at all. At one point, I asked how long he'd been down here. He gave me a thin smile. "Long enough to know the rules. Don't keep everyone safe. Just the ones who learn fast." There was something in his tone, a weight I couldn't name. Later, we paused near a collapsed section of wall. I crouched to mark the spot with chalk, but he placed a hand on my shoulder, stopping me. His grip was too tight, fingers cold even through the fabric. "Don't bother," he said. "No one else will need it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "You went into the file room, didn't you?" My chest froze. I tried to play dumb. "File room." His hand tightened. "Don't lie. I can smell the paper on you." I pulled away, heart pounding, crowbar slick in my grip. He didn't chase me. He just watched, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You shouldn't have read those reports," he said softly. "They make you think the rules are enough, but the rules were never about keeping you safe. They're about keeping them fed slowly." The words hit me like ice water. "Fed," I whispered. He smiled, a tired, brittle thing. "You think this job pays well because it's dangerous?" "No, it pays because we keep sending fresh blood down here. Every broken rule, every mistake, that's not failure. That's food." My stomach turned. The files I'd read, incidents, casualties, people disappearing, it hadn't been accidents. It had been deliberate. I stepped back, the tunnel pressing close around us. "And you? What are you?" His smile didn't falter. "I'm the shepherd. My job isn't to protect you. It's to make sure you last just long enough to ripen." A sound stirred above us, faint dripping that wasn't water. The ceiling seemed to shudder, shadows rippling like liquid skin. My pulse surged. He glanced up, calm as ever. "They're listening now. They like you. You've survived more than most. Makes the taste stronger." I turned and bolted, his voice chasing me through the dark. "You can't run forever, Daniel. You're already theirs." The words echoed long after I lost sight of him. Twisting through the tunnels, until I couldn't tell if it was him speaking or if the tunnels themselves had taken up his voice. I woke on the bench with the metallic taste still in my mouth. The man in the vest was gone, his clipboard left exactly where he'd set it. I sat until the fluorescent buzz felt like a pulse, trying to decide which of three things to do: learn the tunnels and outwalk the thing, run to the surface with the files, or break a rule to trap whatever waits below. Learning it meant patience and becoming food for small mistakes. Running might save others, but Operator 12's tape proved the mimicry followed people above. It whispers in mirrors. It uses faces. I couldn't risk my neighbors. Breaking a rule deliberately felt insane, but it offered control. If I could corral the thing into a sealed space, maybe I could halt it, or at least slow it. It might cost me everything. It might be the only way to stop the cycle. I walked until my boots ached. My flashlight stayed aimed at the floor, the chalk marks dim and slick under condensation. Time narrowed to the thin slice before 2:13 a.m., when the tunnels seemed to hold their breath. I found the brass handle by accident, 8-old service hatch tucked behind a panel. Rule 6 flashed in my mind: leave doors with brass alone. The handle looked like a coin tempting a hand. Behind it could be a seam to the city or a trick. Names were scratched near the hatch, some old, some fresh. Metal screeched when I pried the panel back. The sound cut through the halls like a bell. For a moment, the world held still. Then the air shifted, as if someone had noticed. The hatch opened onto a narrow shaft and a wooden crate. Names were scratched into its sides, fresh ones. The thing answered my decision like an animal answering scent. Faces rose in the sealing water and slid toward the opening. I could have fled. I could have taken proof and tried to warn people above. Instead, I jammed the crate lid against the hatch, forced a crowbar across the opening, and wedged the brass handle under it. It was a crude barricade, hope hammered into wood and metal. They hit the wood with wet, patient hands. The tunnel vibrated. Splinters flew. My arms burned from bracing for a breathless stretch. The world narrowed to the sound of nails and my own beating heart. When the first splinter punched through, I knew survival had changed. It wasn't only about getting out. It was about choosing what to guard with whatever I had left. I kept the bar pressed until my hands ached and the things pushing slacked, whether because it tired or because something else came. Footsteps echoed, then human, purposeful. The man in the vest returned, flanked by others. They peered at the hatch, at the crate, at the names. He looked at me the way you look at someone who has bought time you will eventually collect on. "You did well," he said. The words were plain. Not praise, not comfort. An accounting dot. They worked to shore the barricade. One of them glanced at me with something like recognition and ownership. The files in my pack suddenly felt heavier. I had tried to take agency and had stepped into the gears that fed the thing. When dawn broke, I climbed up the ladder with scraped palms. The street smelled of coffee and rain. Ordinary people passed, tongues of normality that made my chest ache. I thought of running, then ring the files, telling someone, but when I searched my pack, a fresh name was carved into the crate. Mine. On the glass of a shop window, a reflection paused and seemed to echo my movement a beat too late. A whisper brushed the back of my neck when a man on the sidewalk said casually, "You look like you didn't sleep." And for a second, his tone matched me perfectly, like tape replaying a memory. My decision had bought a pause. It had made me complicit. I had traded ignorance for responsibility. Survival was no longer a personal score. It was a balance I could not escape. The tunnels would wait. The thing would watch. And whatever I had saved, I could not be sure I hadn't also damned in the morning light. I walked away because my legs could move, and because not moving felt like surrender. But I did not leave the city to its innocence. The files stayed hidden. The hatch stayed jammed for now. The man in the vest watched me go with calculating eyes. Somewhere, a face repeated my name. I would return. Whatever choice I had made would bind me to the tunnels until an end I could not imagine. My name had become a promise and a threat. I tried to leave the job. That's the truth. After the barricade, after the hatch, after hearing my name etched into the crate, I told myself I would never go back. I made it through one sunrise, then another, walking streets that felt thinner than I remembered. Light stretched over everything like old skin. But by the third night, the city had shifted. Shadows under street lamps clung too long. The hum of the subway carried words I couldn't quite catch. Even in my own apartment, reflections began to delay any hesitations in the mirror, like the glass was thinking about what to show me. I tried to sleep, but the whispers threaded through my dreams. They weren't vague anymore. They said my name, syllable by syllable, like they were teaching it to something that had just learned to speak. By the fourth night, I found a fresh envelope on my kitchen table. No knock, no footsteps, just paper resting in the center, my name on the front. Inside was a new schedule, shift hours listed neatly, and at the bottom, one line scrawled in ink: "The tunnels are patient. You will return." I burned the paper, watched the flames eat it, watched the ash scatter across the counter. It didn't matter. The next morning, another copy slid under my door. I walked for hours, trying to find the courage to leave the city entirely. A bus station, a train out. But each time I stood before a timetable, the letters blurred, unreadable, as if the world itself refused to let me escape. That night, when I finally caved and went back to the steel door, the keypad lit up before I touched it. The lock clicked open, like it had been waiting for me. The man in the vest was there, clipboard under his arm, eyes steady. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just said, "You see now? There's no outside. Not anymore." I followed him down because I had no other choice. My boots echoed once, then not at all, as if the tunnels had already swallowed the sound. The rules were still posted on the wall of the staging room, the same paper, the same smudges. Only one detail had changed. A new line had been added at the bottom, in darker ink than the rest. Rule 8. Daniel must never stop coming back. The letters were jagged, as though carved in haste. My throat closed, because this wasn't a rule for all workers. This was for me. My name fixed, my return ensured. When I touched the paper, it felt warm. The ink pulsed faintly under my fingers, like it was alive. Somewhere in the dark beyond the tunnels, something shifted, something left. I realized then the rules weren't meant to guide us. They were meant to bind us, and now, one of them bore my name.